I'm always fascinated by the stories that John tells in the gospel account that are not present in the other gospels. And it's really interesting because in so many ways, John comes from a whole different point of view and perspective as he's thinking through about the response of the disciples to what is really an extraordinary experience in the course of their life. And what he does in this case is he talks to us, shares with us a story about someone who is not at all unlike ourselves. And it is, I think, a fascinating story. This story comes as a result of the disciples gathering together, but he's missing. He's not there, and we don't know why. There's no explanation as to why Thomas is not present when the other disciples are there, at least as the story that John tells. And so this is what happens. One of the disciples, Thomas, called the Twain, was not with them when Jesus came. So the disciples told him, "We saw the Lord." Thomas said to them, "If I do not see the scars of the nails in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." Now that's pretty dynamic. I mean, he's challenging them, but more importantly, we will discover he's raising the bar for Jesus. A week later, this is a week later, the disciples were together indoors again, and Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." What a great phrase, peace be with you. Don't be unsettled, don't be painful, don't be nervous, don't be anxious, just be at peace. Peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Then stretch out your hand and put it in my side. Stop your doubting and believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Do you believe because you see? How happy are those who believe without seeing." I want to talk with you about and think with you about the whole issue of how we handle tragedy in our lives and how we handle the experience of having a significant major loss in our personal lives. And I know that many of you have had those losses. It's been a partner, it's been a wife, a husband, it's been a child, a grandchild. Sometimes it's what we might think of as fairly simple, as your house burned down, or you lost your job, or you lost some money in the stock market. Those are not simple because, in fact, they are quite significant. Every loss that we experience is a significant loss in our life, even if it's a loss having to do with eyesight or mobility or deteriorating health. The reality is they are a loss. And we have by nature a natural response to those losses with grief. Grief. There are lots of ways in which we experience grief. And I'm thinking of the folks in Ukraine who are struggling with their dreams and their hopes and their desire for freedom and independence, and they're seeing it being destroyed on a daily basis, and they fight back. They fight back, indeed. They too are grieving the likelihood or the possibility of the loss of that freedom, of their nation, of their country, of their brothers and sisters, their husbands and fathers, their sons and daughters. They're grieving that. Now, it occurs to me that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a great job for us a number of years ago. She was a psychiatrist in Boston who had observed a whole lot of folks who had had losses, of a wide variety of losses. And she concluded that there are incidents during the process of grieving that a number of things happen. One of them, there is oftentimes denial of the loss. This can't be. You can't be telling me that that's happened. Sometimes we will literally deny the reality of that loss. It's such a painful experience. When my favorite doctor a number of years ago died, I couldn't believe he had died. The message I got surely must have been an error. So we deny that loss in a number of ways. The next thing that often happens is that we feel an enormous amount of anger toward either God or to the circumstances of life or to someone else. There's a fair amount of anger that oftentimes is even brought upon ourselves. And the response to that loss can be very hurtful toward other people as well as to oneself. And it's not uncommon then that people will bargain. We'll bargain with God, we'll bargain with whoever. Oh, golly, if I do this, if I do that, will this change? And we discover it doesn't change. The experience then is a fair amount of depression when we realize that we have not been able to change it with our denial. We've not been able to change the loss with our anger, either toward ourselves, God, or others. We've not been able to bargain our way into a changed circumstance and situation. She says that the most important time, though all are important, is a place where one comes to some resolution. Resolution. And we're going to talk about the disciples, if you will, for a moment. And I want you to think about your own losses and how you went through those kinds of experiences. And by the way, Kubler-Ross at a later date said, I want to alter that to say that those are not necessarily sequential in order, but they pop up along the way. And they pop up along the way for a long time, And it isn't as if you get over your grief, but your brain remembers the pain and the suffering and the hurt that you felt. And as a result, these issues will come back and come up. And you're normal. And it is very, very much a part of us as human beings who have been given this process, I would maintain, as a follower of God, as a gift. In some respects, our grieving process, our grieving experience is the portal of the entrance into the possibilities and the wonder of resolution and acceptance of the reality of the life that we have and what can be next in our life. Think about the disciples. These disciples spent 3 years, we believe, with Jesus. 3 years. That's an enormous amount of time. More than the 5 years you and I have been together, because they were together all the time, it would appear. They were going from place to place, walking with each other, oftentimes ending up without a place to stay for the night or a meal to eat. And someone would come up and offer them support and help. Often it was a woman who had become a follower of Jesus, like Mary and Martha, who responded, and a host of others. We believe that Mary Magdalene was one of those women who had independent wealth and who was a follower and who offered support for the disciples. Think about it. They were together constantly. They were experiencing both the excitement and the joy of seeing this Jesus who was coming with a whole new message. We call it the good news. A message that said, indeed, that God loves the world so much, not is angry with the world and doesn't want to hurt the world, but is offering the opportunity if the world will respond through the life and ministry of Jesus. So those 3 years were intense for them. And the last 4 weeks following the death of Jesus must have been horrible for them. It's not surprising that the writers of the gospel accounts report that they hid away. They hid away not only because they were afraid that they too would be captured and executed, as did their leader, but I suspect they hid away because they were overwhelmed by their grief. Grief not only in the loss of Jesus, he's now dead, And they don't even believe the women who said, we saw him. We know that he's alive. And didn't believe a couple of the other people who met Jesus, and they said, no, it can't be. It took an incredible and spontaneous response on the part of Jesus to let them know, yes, indeed, I am alive. So think about it. They were experiencing enormous grief, not unlike the grief we experience when we have a huge loss in our life and are struggling with coping with that loss, understanding it, coming to terms with it, and at some point, one would hope, resolution. Thomas says to his friends who are fellow disciples, who tell him, oh, you weren't here, but Jesus was here. You can almost hear him saying, yeah, right. Yeah, right. I mean, I saw the pain on your face when you came and told us that he was dead. I saw you denying those women who said they saw it. And you're telling me now, because you are a disciple, that Jesus is alive. You just kind of imagine this questioning of the disciples. I will not believe you, he's saying. I will not believe you until I have placed my finger on the wound on his hands and placed my hand into the side where the spear had gone. That's it. Without that evidence, I will not believe. That is such a powerful statement. I will not believe unless I have evidence. I suspect there have been many times in your own grieving experience that you say to yourself, I cannot believe that this happened. I cannot believe I'll get over it. I cannot believe that I will be able to get on with my life. For indeed, our lives sometimes feel empty and hollow, and we wonder, how can we possibly move on? But God, through Jesus, shows to us that there is that possibility that if we are open, that is to say open, as John later on in Revelation said, if you open up the door of your heart, the door of your mind, the door of your soul, if you open it up, Jesus will be there. The good news will come. And God will not deny your pain, will not say, oh, don't forget it, it's okay, you'll get better. God will listen to you. There are 4 things I want to say about grief and about these disciples. Grieving is natural and normal. It happens to all human beings, to all persons of every race, of every color, of every nationality, of every origin. Everyone experiences pain and suffering from significant loss that impacts their lives. You and I are no different. You and I are no different. I feel it, you feel it, we feel it. Secondly, it's important that we recognize that grief is part of a gift in so many ways that we have. It may not seem like a gift. No, thank you, we don't want to feel grief. But the gift is indeed present to help us move through that process. Third, I want to say that you and I, both when we're experiencing grief, need to find someone who is an incredibly good listener. Someone who will say to us, I hear you. I want you to know that I care for you and I love you and I will be here with you. So whenever you have a need to share your pain and your suffering, I'm with you. I had a hard time discovering that. As I would visit in the hospital as a young minister, I thought I had to be talking. I thought I had to be telling people, oh, you'll get better, things are fine, thank you for the doctors, the nurses, the lady who cleans the floor. But what I later discovered very quickly was what people needed were 2 things: my presence as I represented the church, you, as followers of Jesus. They needed my presence, someone to come in. And occasionally I will see someone who says, I remember that when I broke my back and was in the hospital for over a month and a half, hanging in one of those racks back then, you came in a lot. And you laughed with me, and you cried with me, and you were with me. And here it is, just recently she walks up and says, do you remember me? And I had to admit I didn't remember her. And then she told the story. Oh, and then I remembered who she was and what we had done. Being with someone is crucial. And finding someone who will listen to you. You don't have to be a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist or psychiatric social worker with the right answers. You just have to be there, because that becomes the right answer. And if they want to know how you got through your pain, share it with them. Share it with them. I don't know if I've told you this before. I did the funeral service for the wife of a minister who had died in Eagle River, and I served for a couple of months as the interim in that congregational church. And after the service, which was a wonderful service, both of song and testimony of uniqueness of this woman, they had two small children, a little girl who at the end of the service, everybody went downstairs, and the little girl was playing with her little friends and laughing and having just a great time playing. One of the people went up to her and said, don't you realize your mother just got buried? And I thought, oh no, don't do that. Go up and play with her. Be with her, laugh with her, because she needs that. She's a child. So find someone who can listen a lot. And fourthly, keep in mind that if you open yourself up, even with your doubt and your anger and your attempt to change the circumstances, and even if you're feeling terribly down and depressed and like you'll never get over it, share that with God. God is more than delighted to hear your pain, to hear your suffering. God is the epitome of compassion. Compassion, which means that pain, that suffering, that hurt goes into you. And if you cry, cry. And if you feel sad with that person. Indeed, they will know that you are genuine in terms of your presence with them. The disciples, I'm so grateful for Thomas. Thomas, who struggled with his loss, who was away from them and missed out on some opportunities, but he needed some assurance that indeed Jesus indeed had risen, and indeed he was alive. He opened up for Thomas that realization that he now could say that he believed. He believed strongly, he believed intensely, and the gospel account in John is powerful as he struggles with his pain, struggles with his doubt, and struggles with whether he can believe without being able to see. And he then says, my Lord and my God. It's no longer I won't believe. It is now I do believe. It is the same as saying, I understand, and I'm better, and and I love the person I've lost, and I care about that person. And I indeed am one who will respond faithfully to you. God bless each of you as you aid others in their grief and as you deal with your own losses. Amen.